She's an award-winning writer, a hunting guide, archery and rifle instructor, keynote speaker, and all-around outdoors woman who encourages you to get outside, hunt, fish, shoot, and savor all that life has to offer. And now, here's your host, Mia Anstine.
Well, hey, hi, hello. It's so great to be visiting with you again. Thank you for stopping by the Mac Outdoors podcast. If you've been here before, welcome back. And if it's your first time, then I am happy that you're here and I hope you enjoy the show. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the North American model of wildlife conservation. If you already know what that is, then maybe you need a refresher so you can go educate others. And if you don't know, then stay tuned so you can learn something today.
This winter, stay warm from head to toe with WSI Sports' heater gear layers. Use Leah's affiliate code, LLCO10, at WSISports.com and get 10% off your order. All products are proudly made in the USA. WSI Sports is bringing back pride in American-made clothing. That code once again, LLCO10 for 10% off at WSISports.com.
So a lot of people often confuse conservation and preservation. And conservation is the wise use of a resource or whatever you happen to be using. If you're going to be conserving something, it means that you're using it but not wiping it out. So if I live in Southern California and I'm trying to conserve water, it means I'm not just going to leave the faucet running all day long. I'm not going to be watering my lawn for hours upon end because I want to conserve the water. And if we look at preservation, preservation is no use of something. So we preserve jellies and jams and things like that. And when we preserve those, we're putting them away so they're not going to be used. If you have no use of wildlife, something happens in that they overpopulate, they tend to overgrow their habitat and the resources, and they end up being sick. And what we like I'm talking about myself as a hunter, what I like to see is healthy animals that live on the habitat without disease and illness and sickness. And yes, we do have death from predators. There sometimes is starvation. There sometimes are accidents with vehicles, different things like that. So animals have a lot of different ways that they die, but a long, drawn-out suffering is not something that I ever want to see, or hopefully not many animals will have to have their demise that way. So I wanted to talk to you about the North American model of wildlife conservation because we have a special model of conservation here in America. And some people don't really understand what it is and how it came about, and they don't understand that hunting is highly regulated in the United States. You can't just go out and shoot anything that you see, and there are a lot of regulations, a lot of classes, and money that has to be spent on hunting licenses and such, and so I'm going to be explaining that to you. First of all, I wanted to let you know that wildlife and habitat are around today because of hunters and anglers. Hunters and anglers spend millions of dollars that go back into the state and into the resources that help maintain healthy wildlife populations. So the North American model of wildlife conservation, it's been proven to be the most successful model in the world. We have had populations that were close to extinction that are now thriving. And so how did we get to that point where animals were almost extinct? What happened is before settlers had come to America, the indigenous people used to take wild things and they would harvest those animals. They would basically use them sparingly. They would use them for food, shelter, and clothing. And they believed that the wildlife belonged to the Creator. So the Lord is the overseer of all wild animals and humans. And so when they would hunt, they would take what they needed only to survive, and they wouldn't take more than they needed. when settlers came to America, many of them came from areas where only the elite were allowed to hunt. Kings, queens, parliaments, if you had a special permission from a leader, then maybe in some cases you were allowed to hunt, or sometimes it was only a landowner, a property owner, that was able to hunt the animals on their property. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity for everybody to hunt. It was only those select few. So when the settlers came to America, there were no rules for harvesting animals. And so what happened is the populations plummeted rapidly because there wasn't a rule, there was no regulations. And they were taking animals for market hunting and selling furs and basically taking more than they needed. And what happened is those numbers started to dwindle. The prairies were barren. And that's when leaders of our country realized that something needed to be done. And so limits were set to protect the wildlife and laws were created. And this eventually became what is today known as the North American model of wildlife management. The North American model of wildlife conservation, it has 7 pillars that it stands on. So there are 7 main points. And one of the main points that I think should just be highlighted above all is that it allows an opportunity for everybody to hunt. It's not just for governors or legislators or landowners who can hunt, but rather anyone who follows the laws, criteria, and anybody. They have the opportunity to pursue wildlife or wild game. So I wanted to tell you the rest of the pillars, and we'll just start out. Number 1, wildlife is held in public trust. It is not owned by the governor. It's not owned by landowners. It is a public trust, and it is managed to sustain populations for future generations. So we're not just seizing the day from me and you and for the here and now. We're looking for the future, for if you're going to have grandchildren and maybe their children and grandchildren. We want wildlife to be healthy and here forever. Number 2, market hunting or selling of wild game is illegal. So I cannot go and take my elk and shoot that and package it up and sell it. That is illegal. I would get in trouble for that. Now, if I want to share some with a family member or a friend, I can do that. But there are certain percentages that I can't just give my whole animal to them. So you can't market hunt or sell your wild game. Number 3, there are laws that regulate the land and the use and the hunting seasons. And these laws ensure that we will have the resource again for future generations. Number 4, there is no frivolous use of wildlife. There are agencies and the sportsmen that have developed codes of ethic, codes of conduct, and these are to ensure the longevity of hunting. So no frivolous use. We don't want to just be shooting something to shoot something. When we go hunting, if we shoot an animal, there are rules about what you must take, what parts you can leave in the field. A lot of people often comment, I hope you eat the whole thing. You know what? We have to. It's part of the rules. The only parts that are not eaten are the parts that are not edible. And so those are things that are part of these pillars. On to number 5. Wildlife is an international resource. So we have waterfowl and birds that migrate from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere and back and forth. And so with that, there are international rules of regulation for hunting. So this has become something that is not just in our country, but worldwide. And that's one of the pillars, is that we want to manage wildlife with our neighbors, not just for ourselves. It's a bigger picture. Number 6, scientific management is what will ensure a healthy balance between habitat and wild creatures. This scientific management is another one of these pillars that is just insanely important. We don't want to be managing wildlife based on emotion, because our human emotions don't understand the needs of the wild animals. Whereas if we can look at the science and look and see that this animal needs this habitat to live in, that's how we manage the wild animals. Number 7 is that one that I told you first, opportunity for all. That is the 7th pillar, and it ensures that there is an opportunity for everyone to hunt, not just for an elite bureaucrat or something like that, not just for the rich, not just for the certain races or nationalities or ethnicities. There is opportunity for all. So hunting is a wonderful thing. I come from a background of generations of hunters that really embraced the healthy meals. And also, it could have partly been because we weren't too rich when I was a youngin'. So there is that opportunity to go get some organic food, to connect with nature, to become healthy and get in the outdoors. Something else I wanted to circle back to is I mentioned that hunters and anglers spend millions of dollars on their activities. In 1937, the Pittman-Robertson Wildlife Restoration Act was created. And what this is, it was an excise tax that was placed on the sale of all sporting arms and ammunition. The money from that is divvied out to the states, and there are different methods of matching and giving this to the state's Department of Natural Resources or wildlife agencies so that they can use it and put it back into the state's habitat and wildlife management. In 1950, the Dingell-Johnson Act was created, and this is very similar to Pittman-Robertson. It places a tax on fishing equipment, and that money, again, is put back into the states to manage our waterways. These taxes generate more than $7 million a year. $7 million a year just from the taxes. And these funds are used to conserve all wildlife and habitat, not just to manage elk or deer or animals that we hunt, but all wild animals, even the ones that we do not hunt. So those are some of the things that are super important about conservation and hunting, and how hunting plays a role in all the wild animals that you see in the country today. If you have questions about today's episode, please reach out to me. You can email me at contact@miaanstine.com. You can reach out to me on social media. My handle is Mia Anstine, or you can contact Mac Outdoors on Facebook or Instagram. I hope you have a great one, and I'll be talking to you again soon.
Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.